Hello, everyone. My name is Adam Williams, and you are listening or perhaps watching to another episode of Retail Redeveloped. I'm very excited today because I have a salty retail veteran in the studio with me today, and we are going to be talking about Home Depot. We're going to be talking about years and years of merchandising and retail experience. We're going to talk about the growth of one of America's most dominant retail platforms and brands. I'm so excited because I'm joined by Jim Ingles. He is a world-renowned expert with 60 years of experience in the retail and home improvement industry. He served in executive positions with Home Depot for 13 years as vice president of merchandising, executive vice president of merchandising, strategic development, you name it. He was a member of the corporate board of directors. And Jim, you're bringing a ton of experience to the table, some great stories. You've got a new book out. We're going to talk about all of this. But first off, Jim, I want to say thank you for joining me today. And just take a minute or 2 minutes or 5 minutes and just tell everybody a little bit about your background and how you became this, pioneer in the home improvement category with years and years of experience. And tell us a little bit about the why behind what kept you going through that insane journey, and just share some wisdom with us about how you got to sit in the seat that you're in now.
Okay, well, thank you, Adam. It's true. I have been in the retail home improvement business for 60 years, focusing on home improvement. Starting out, probably the first half of my life was out in California working for both DIY home centers as well as professional building materials suppliers. In 1983, at that time, Home Depot had just started in Atlanta, Georgia, and had only 8 stores. And I was contacted by them to see if I would like to come to Atlanta and help join this new fledgling company. The industry at that time was quite different. There were 32 regional home center chains across the United States, and they were much smaller than a Home Depot. Their prices were much higher than a Home Depot. They had a different service level than Home Depot. And the general consensus was, if you talk to the vendors, if you talk to the experts in the industry, this whole Home Depot thing just wasn't going to work. The stores were too big. The prices were too low. It wasn't a viable business. But I came back to Atlanta and I visited the stores that we had open and said, my goodness, this is something really unique. This is something that's going to change the industry. And so I took the leap of faith and joined the company in 1983. Like I say, we had only 8 stores at the time. And then it was from there a whirlwind adventure of opening stores across the United States. And what was interesting is that, excuse me, as we went into each of these markets where these 32 home centers existed, these regional home centers, each and every one of those home centers ultimately went out of business because we did have the better mousetrap. We did have the better package for the customer. So I left Home Depot in 96. And when I left Home Depot, I began working with retail home centers around the world, not focused in the U.S., but focused in South America, focused in Europe, focused in Japan, focused in China, focused in Australia. And so for the last 20 years, I have been working with these various international home centers to educate them on, well, how do you have a high productivity business? How do you grow your business so that you can have the same success that Home Depot had in the United States? And from that, I developed quite a curriculum, which I decided during this previous COVID year that curriculum would make an excellent book. And so that's what motivated me to then put all these thoughts into writing. And I did, in fact, 2 days ago, publish Breakthrough Retailing, which is sort of a summary of of what I have learned over those many years of working with Depot and then working with retailers around the world, with the idea that what really made Home Depot so successful? Why Home Depot? Why is Home Depot the largest home center in the world? And people would ask me, well, is it the pricing? Is it the size of the store? Is it the promotion? But and all those are important. But the real reason that the company was so successful was that the servant leadership of Home Depot created what I call a bleeding orange culture. The bleeding orange culture was a culture where we embraced the principles that were established by the company through the leadership of our management team, and there was such a feeling of camaraderie in the company that we often said that if you were to cut us, we would bleed orange. And so that became the subtitle of my book, which is How a Bleeding Orange Culture Can Change Everything. And it was a unique culture that decentralized the business and put ownership at the local level, which really was the secret to being customer-centric, being really focused on our customers. And that's basically what my book about is how the culture of Home Depot helped it be a unique organization with unique principles that really delighted the customer.
I can't tell you how many times I've gone in and out of the doors of a Home Depot, especially over the last years. We moved. I feel like I've been in and out of there more times than I can count, and certainly got the credit card out of the wallet more times than I can count. But before we go into, because I want to touch on, how you're able to take servant leadership from the top down. But before that, so Home Depot is easy to just, it's almost like oxygen, right? It's just a thing that exists in America, right? You can't go into any, even mid-size city in the country without seeing a Home Depot. So it's something that we almost take for granted. It's just something that's always been. But in fact, the market was dominated by the Ace Hardwares of the world and the small players and the almost neighborhood players. And I'd love to understand what the founders saw and what they were able to capture, what that secret sauce was. We all know it's a big store. We all know the prices are aggressive, but walk me through what the founders saw and what the founders were able to tap into that created this phenomenon now that is just something that, like I said, it just exists.
Yeah, well, the original founders of Home Depot were Bernie Marcus, Arthur Blank, and Pat Farah. And all three of those gentlemen came from the home center industry. Remember, I mentioned there were 32 regional home center chains. And so, and I myself came from one of those stores as well. So all of us came from that same background. And it was basically a model that was duplicated over and over again. And that set the rules of the industry. And they were basically small stores compared to Home Depot. The Home Depot store today is 100,000 square feet. A typical home center at that time was maybe 30,000 square feet. And they purchased through two-step distribution. So you had the wholesaler that fed that fed those chains, and then you had a relatively high margin on those products from those wholesalers. And so the whole idea of Home Depot was let's build a store that we can buy direct from the manufacturers. Let's cut out the middlemen. In order to do that, the stores have to be bigger because we have to be able to take truckload shipments. And so, as I mentioned before, the stores were so much bigger. The prices were so much lower. It's because we really changed the logistics. Today you think about Amazon as a disruptor because they're changing the distribution patterns in how people buy. Well, in 1980, Home Depot was a disruptor. It was changing the distribution patterns. And the end result was that there were many large wholesalers across the United States that were feeders to these literally thousands of small stores that ultimately did go out of business, as well as the stores themselves, because Depot was the disruptor that did in fact change the way home improvement products were sold in the country.
That's incredible, and what a vision to see that was a giant opportunity in the industry. Were all of the founders kind of unceremoniously kicked out of the original parent? And did I read that somewhere that they were kind of jettisoned, and this was a pretty good revenge?
It was. Bernie Marcus and Arthur Blank were employed by the Dalen Company, which Dalen was a retail conglomerate. And one of their divisions was Handy Dan. And Handy Dan was the largest home center chain in the United States, if you go back to the 70s and 80s. And they operated different branded stores in different parts of the country. And in Northern California, they had a chain called Bonanza. And Northern California is a very unionized type of business environment. And those stores were trying to unionize. And Bernie and Arthur took steps that they thought was acceptable, but that Dalen did not feel was acceptable. And the end result was they were literally marched out of the corporate office with guards and summarily fired from their job. At that time, the third partner, Pat Farah, had started a new company called Homeco in Long Beach, California. And Homeco was, in fact, the first big box warehouse home center. And so Bernie got a call from Ken Langone, who is the investment banker. And Ken said to Bernie, look, I can raise the capital. We can start a new home center chain and compete against Handy Dan. So so Bernie and Arthur then contacted Pat Farah, and because his store was really revolutionizing the idea of home improvement. It was 100,000 feet. It was selling at wholesale prices, and so they discussed this with Pat. Pat said, "Yeah, I'd be very interested." And they said, "Okay, Pat. Well, let's take a look at your books." And Pat said, "Well, I don't really have any books." So they did an evaluation of the company and said, "You know what? The merchandising concept is great, but the financial controls are not so great."
Yeah, not so great.
And so, why don't we take the idea and let's find a different market. Los Angeles is a very big market. It's a very hard market to penetrate. So let's find a smaller market in the Sun Belt. Let's take the merchandising idea, but let's put some financial discipline to it. And let's see if we can't reinvent the industry. And that's exactly how Home Depot started.
And so Atlanta was the test market, probably started with one or two stores. You joined shortly thereafter, and then the rest is history. Is that pretty much?
Well, what happened was that J.C. Penney's had opened these giant stores called the Treasury. In some markets they were called Treasure Island. In other markets they were called the Treasury. These Treasure Island stores were huge. I mean, they were 130, 140,000 square feet, and they were not profitable. And they had four stores.
Some things don't change, I guess, with JCPenney. That was mean. I don't know why I had to say that. So picking somebody while they're down.
So they had four stores in Atlanta, and so the three founders went to JCPenney's. They were headquartered in New York at the time, and said, "Well, we'd like to subdivide." Perhaps 60,000 feet. And now 60,000 feet today is not a big store, but back then it was twice as big as anything in the market.
Right.
And so Home Depot took the lease on four subdivided treasury stores, one in each corner of Atlanta, and that was the first 4 stores. And about a year and a half later, the same opportunity came up in Miami, where Treasury also had 4 stores, and they did the same thing there. And that's about the time I joined the company, is when we had and then what's interesting is the property manager, the director of property for JCPenney at that point, fell in love with the Home Depot concept, and it became our property guy.
Yeah, and that's a story that I think we're going to hear more and more of in today's climate. Obviously, being in the regional big box retail game at the moment is a scary place to be. A lot of what I do is a little bit more urban, so I'm not as subjected to that pain as a lot of my contemporaries. But I think that, one of the silver linings to COVID and to everyone, having to completely reinvent themselves, or a lot of people having to reinvent themselves in the retail world, I think what you just mentioned is going to be an unforeseen opportunity where you have these other retailers that are maybe just ideas and really smart people's heads, or something that is to the investment banker level that is already finding the capital and is waiting for a way to deploy. I think it's going to be interesting, especially as retail is becoming, as much a logistics game as a merchandising game. I think that we're going to see some really interesting scenarios play out, and new people that don't exist now that are going to be able to kind of jumpstart their growth because of more opportunity than there was a few years ago.
Yeah, there's, logistics is certainly a key part of the retail business today. In fact, I have 2 grandsons that are in university with business majors, and I keep telling them, logistics guys, think about logistics, because that's just so much of the business today. And because there's so much variation in the business, from very big boxes to like Home Depot, to a small store like an Ace Hardware, to the internet and the specialty retailing that's on the internet. All of this involves unique types of logistics in order to make those models work. And technology is such a key part of making those logistics work, that whoever has the best technology in each of those different formats is going to be the dominant player.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I 100% agree. So before we get into culture, where did the name come from? Again, it's such a simple thing now, and it just exists. I'd love to hear how Home Depot was first written down on the back of a napkin somewhere.
Well, the way the name came about was that Bernie Marcus, who was the chairman of the company, was riding in a car with a potential investor. And they were talking about different names. And Bernie had kind of a crazy name he had in mind, which is something like, Bad Bernie's Bargain Center.
Ooh, really rolls off the tongue.
And they're driving in the car, and one of the wives of the people in the car said, well, it'll be kind of like a Home Depot, won't it? And the light went on, and
exactly, light bulb.
That's the name. So marketing companies have brought in and paid millions of dollars to come up with a name for a company, but the Home Depot's name just came from a conversation in the back of a car.
I hope that wife got a nice thank you present if she's not given royalties. I hope that I can tell you, for one thing, my wife would never let anybody hear the end of that if she came up with the name that was in every hometown across the country. So let's get into. I mean, you said something earlier that I want to unpack a little bit, and that's how servant leadership helped grow this company. And it's amazing. And I hate picking on specific retailers, but I do it every show anyway. I mean, when you go into a lot of retail stores, you're with Amazon, you don't really need to go into a store nearly in the same way that you used to. And if you are in a store, it's because you are trying to get a question answered, or you're trying to get a better idea of kind of an immersion of a brand or a product. You want to be able to touch it and feel it. And a lot of retailer stores that you go into, I don't want to say you're treated as a nuisance, but you're certainly not getting any kind of white glove treatment. And I've always been impressed that at Home Depot, it's supposed to be a manly thing where you don't, you shouldn't have to ask for help at Home Depot, but I sometimes need some instructions to screw in a light bulb. So I'm not afraid to ask a question at Home Depot. And it's amazing to me how people are always willing to go out of their way to make sure that you get your questions answered. Even if they don't know it, they're going to find somebody that knows it. And it's kind of even trickled down into the app now. I mean, the app tells you, what bin, what bay, what aisle, how many are there. And even if it's not 100% accurate, it's I can tell somebody's working really hard to try to make it accurate. So walk me through how that all started with servant leadership from the top, and how it's been able to stay a part of the culture for now since, 1980, 83, whenever it was.
Well, the whole idea of the servant leadership is to really push decisions down and out through the company. And by doing that, empowering the local people to run their business and to take ownership in their business. In order to do that, you have to educate the staff not only into how to run the business, but why. What is the why behind the business? Because if they know the why, then they can make the good decisions. And so you have to have a driving mission. You have to have a North Star that drives the company. And the North Star for Home Depot was delighting the customer. And our motto was that we will give our customers no reason to shop elsewhere for home improvement products. And our employees knew that they were empowered to do that. And that's the attitude that the customer feels. A customer walks into a store, they will determine their attitude of the brand of that store by the qualities they see in the people. If they see that people care, if they see that people are knowledgeable, if they see that people are competent, that they can deliver, that they will consistently deliver, that they have their back, then they will take those qualities, and they will then apply those qualities, to the brand. And I think that's exactly what has happened at Home Depot. It's interesting if when you read the book, what you will see is that culture was developed by the founders of the company. They lived it through example, and it was ingrained into the culture of the company. And then in 2000, the original founders left the company, and a new CEO was brought in from outside. His name was Bob Nardelli. He came from the General Electric company. General Electric was not a decentralized company that empowered local people. It was a very centralized company. And for the next 7 years, Home Depot went into a reversal, and the culture was actually held down. And the end result, if you look at market share, prior to 2000, every year Home Depot grew market share against Lowe's. During the 7 years of Nardelli, Home Depot lost market share to Lowe's. After Nardelli left and the culture was reestablished by the next CEO, which was a guy named Frank Blake, Home Depot began to grow that market share again. And so the culture of the company and the attitude of the employees has an incredible impact on the way that the customers view the brand and essentially where they spend their dollar votes.
So how can you keep that going? How can you, because culture is a buzzword, right? You hear it all the time. and it seems like something that, it's one of those, if it were that easy, everybody would do it kind of things. And this is so tired. I hate going back to this example, but it's so good when you're talking about culture. You can walk into a McDonald's, a Zaxby's, and a Chick-fil-A that are all on the same corner of the same road in the same town with the same labor pool. And the experience that you're going to get in that Chick-fil-A is going to be 180 degrees different than the one that you get at McDonald's or at, pick Hardee's, whatever, pick any of the other fast food users. And you can tell that they have figured out how to instill that culture, how to keep that culture, how to grow that culture. And, I would assume part of it is the way that they pick their individual store operators, but it's more than that, right? It just permeates the 16-year-old girl that's taking your order that, standing out in the blazing sun and still has a smile on her face, right? I don't get how they do it. So how do you instill that culture, and then how do you keep it going and make it more than just, a BS buzzword that is on some kind of blackboard somewhere that nobody ever looks at?
Yeah, well, people need to be compensated for their work, and you need to be willing to pay a premium for good people. If you pay a premium for good people, then those people will stay. And because they stay, you can then invest your time in training them, in teaching them, in educating them. And part of that education is not just talking about the how, but the why, as I mentioned before, so that they really understand what can they do to make a difference. And people don't just work for money. They work because they want to be part of something successful. They want to be something bigger than themselves. And so an important part of developing that staff that's excited about the customer is giving them a cause that's bigger than themselves, that your company has a vision that your employees buy into. And a lot of this happens by finding those successes and then celebrating the successes. It's so important to celebrate success. And as you celebrate success, those develop into stories. And by management telling those stories and retelling those stories on a constant basis, it becomes part of the fabric of the company. Give you an example. We had a store manager in Louisiana, Larry Bucksberg, and every morning at Home Depot, you have a cheering session. You bring all the employees together and you have a cheering session. And one of the things you do is you spell out the name of the company 3 times, and then you ask what that's all about. And the answer is customer service. And so at the end of each session, Larry would take a dollar bill and he'd put it in the pocket of every employee. And during the day, he would walk through the store and he would observe how they treated the customer. And if they walked by a customer without greeting the customer, without starting a conversation, he went back and took the dollar back. And so what that showed was that what was important to him? What was important to him was not if the products were arranged neat or if the store was swept clean. No, what was important to him was that we acknowledged each customer. And so by the employees seeing the management living the word and expressing the culture in what they do, and knowing that that's what they're looking at, that's what they're paying attention to, well, then they know how to react. They know how to behave. They know what management expects. And so it's a matter of management walking the talk, and not just rewarding with money, but rewarding with emotion, with psychological benefits. And what happens in so many businesses and is they get so focused on the quarterly numbers, and even though they say people are important, well, we're not going to do bonuses this quarter because the numbers didn't come in right. And when you get overly focused on the KPIs and the numbers and forget what your mission is, that's when the culture basically goes to hell.
Yeah, starts to flounder. Well, I mean, we've spent a lot of time on Home Depot for good reason, but I mean, you've had a great career both stateside and otherwise. Walk me through what you tell people when they're starting a retail business, and obviously everybody wants to be the next Home Depot. What have you found that has kind of transcended industries and is kind of bedrock principles that you always try to get people to understand and adapt? Walk me through just some other things that you would put on your kind of billboard that you want everybody to see.
Well, I think the main message that I would give to people is that you have to be customer centric, and that's kind of a catchphrase today. Customer centric. Everybody says, well, we're going to be customer centric, but then do they put their money where their mouth is? And in most cases, the answer is no, they don't. Every CEO, you ask any CEO in the world, do you value your people? Yes. Do you take care of your people? Yes. Do you invest in your people? Yes. But then look at the numbers and see if they really do. And in most cases, they really don't. And so the key really is to be customer centric and to understand that all your decisions should not be based on what's the best for our logistics group, what's the best for our marketing group, what's the best for our HR group. No, all the decisions have to be what's best for our customer. And everybody has to understand there's only one KPI, and the only KPI is customer satisfaction. And we should all be working together to delight that customer. So whether you're talking about, the merchandise assortment, whether you're talking about the pricing, whether you're talking about the service aspect of the business, you always have to go back to, how does the customer perceive it? What is the customer's perception? Perception is reality. And the only reality is the perception in your customer's mind. And so your brand is your most important asset, and you must protect that asset. And that asset isn't something that you have in your hands. That asset is in the mind of your customer.
That's so true, Jim. Jim, do me a favor. Tell everybody how they can connect with you, how they can obviously get a copy of your new book, how they can just follow what you're doing and connect with you if they've enjoyed what they've heard so far today.
Well, thank you. The best way to learn about me and learn about my book is to go onto my website. My website is called breakthroughretailing.com. Breakthrough Retailing is the name of my book. It's called Breakthrough Retailing: How a Bleeding Orange Culture Can Change Everything. So, please go to breakthroughretailing.com. You'll see a little bit about me. You'll see a little bit about the book. And also, we'll have ways to contact me if you wish to.
Wonderful. Now, before I let you go, I always like to do some quick knee-jerk questions, just some kind of soundbite kind of answers that I think everybody kind of enjoys. Obviously, the most important clickbait. I would get kicked out of the podcast club for retail if I didn't bring this up. The retail apocalypse. I think it's as cheesy as everybody else in our industry does, but obviously retail is changing in an incredibly drastic way. What would your advice be to your peer group, your constituents, on how they can prepare, adapt, survive, thrive in a time where retail is just changing by the minute?
Yeah. The first thing is that there is no retail apocalypse. The retail apocalypse is a red herring. There are more stores today than there were last year, and more stores next year than there will be this year. So there is no retail apocalypse. There are bad stores that have gone out of business. and they should have gone out of business. And in most cases, they went out of business not because of e-commerce. They went out of business because they did not innovate. They tried to continue the same formula that they had for the last 20 years and didn't innovate and change with the time. And they didn't adapt to the new technologies and the new attitudes of their customers. So there is no retail apocalypse. There are great opportunities in the retail business, and there's a false premise that, well, because e-commerce doesn't have stores, that it's a more efficient way to get product to the customer, and that's a lie. The most efficient way to get the most popular products that sell in the most quantity to the customer is through the retail store, because you can buy in quantity, and the logistics, which we talked about earlier, the logistics work very much in favor of the physical store because it's so expensive to handle the logistics in e-commerce. What you find in today's world is that if there's an apocalypse coming, it's for the pure e-commerce player, because the pure e-commerce player, think about this. Average retail person in the past has made about $10 an hour. The warehouse worker makes $15 an hour, and with fringe benefits, it's $18 an hour. And there are more people today working in distribution of e-commerce. That population is growing faster than the store population. So you're trading store hours and for warehouse hours. You have the incredible cost of freight to get the product to the customer. You have this situation where there's more and more and more e-commerce companies, and the only way you can be successful if you're pure e-commerce, because you don't have a storefront, is you have to be constantly advertising. But if you want to advertise, you can only advertise on basically 3 platforms, Facebook and Amazon,
Google,
and so what's happened, you have more and more companies trying to get the attention of the customer through a narrow media. And because they're an oligopoly, they can charge whatever they want. So the pure e-commerce company today has a logistics problem. They have a labor problem. They have a working capital problem in trying to maintain a long tail of slow selling merchandise. And they have an incredible promotional problem. So there is no retail apocalypse. However, I think that there are probably many pure e-commerce retailers that ultimately are going to find that they are in an e-commerce apocalypse.
So I think what you're saying is very, very interesting and very timely because of Warby Parker just announced their IPO. Allbirds is about to do the same. And if you look at the most successful e-commerce companies, the most successful direct-to-consumer companies, they are trying to figure out a way to get into the brick and mortar business to supplement their already robust direct-to-consumer platforms. So it's interesting how things come full circle, and I think it plays into kind of what you're saying. And it's very interesting when you look at not everybody's probably dug into Warby's IPO filings because everybody's not as big of a nerd as me and some of my friends are. But the cost of a customer and the cost of selling that pair of eyewear to an e-commerce person versus someone that's walking into the store is wildly different. And we could probably spend an entire another podcast talking about that and what that means. I'm going to hit you with one more question before I let you go and before I let you get back to your busy life. Is what has you excited about the kind of pandemic world as it relates to retail, or the post-pandemic world as it relates to retail? What do you think will be something very interesting, helpful, groundbreaking that comes from this kind of forced adjustment and evolution that we're all witnessing right now?
Well, I think that it has helped make it clear to all the the brick and mortar retailers that they have to be omni-channel retailers, and they have to be proficient in their technology. And what you see in our business in particular is the growing use of the car pickup in the parking lot. And I think that ultimately is going to affect how stores are designed and how the parking lots are laid out, because you have drive-through banks and you have drive-through fast food places. I think you're going to see in the hardlines business, you're going to see more redesigning of how do we flow not just our customers through the store, but how do we flow our customers through the parking lot. And I think you're going to see a lot more drive-through facilities where there's minimal contact and ease of loading, and you're still going to see people using the internet to place their orders. But I think they're going to find ways to make it easier to pick those products up at the store.
So I think I'm giving away I say it all the time, but I think the grocery store today is going to look so different than the grocery store in 10 years. I think that it's going to be interesting to see if it looks like an old school bank teller line where it's a massive drive-through organization with a 500,000 square foot logistics warehouse 10, 15 miles away that is just constantly fulfilling these orders. So I agree with you 100%. I think high volume things like that are such a no-brainer because I don't think that the Publix, Kroger's of the world can rely on Instacart. It just seems like such a stopgap measure to me, and it drives me crazy when my wife uses it because my order's never right. So I think that industry is going to be, it'll be interesting to see if it skips straight to delivery only, or if there will be a huge drive-through component. So I 100% agree. And to your point earlier, retail has become a logistics game. It's really interesting. Well, Jim, I just want to take a second and acknowledge you. Thank you so much for coming on, sharing 60 years of lessons and wisdom with us, as well as some fun stories about Bernie's big home shack or whatever that horrible first name was. Thank goodness that woman was in the car, and because I don't know if that would have ever taken off like Home Depot. But thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom with us. I had a really good time, and go check out Breakthrough Retailing, how a bleeding orange culture can change everything, and it certainly has. Thank you for your time, Jim. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Adam. Bye-bye.